So I want to welcome everyone to the second episode of the Becoming Project. We are excited to journey again through what it means to become who God has called us to become. I am your host, Pastor Michael. Michael, whatever sounds good to you, I'm cool with that. We get to do this here at Dayspring United Methodist Church, and so we're just excited because we have the one and only Bill Norwood with us this morning, and so we're excited to have you with us today. Thank you for being here, taking your time out on this early Saturday morning at 9 a.m. here, Arizona time. And so we're excited. Just a brief overview of what the Becoming Project is and why I created or felt the Lord calling me to create this space. One, it is because we all have a story. And we're all on a journey becoming who God has called us to be. And so I felt like let's create a space where we can hear the stories and the journeys of people as they become who God has called them to be or have become who God has called them to be. And so we get to do this one-on-one interview style. I love this model, so we can just talk and just it's easy. We don't have any scripts per se, and so we're just going to move forward. So, Bill, welcome. It's good to have you.
Thank you. It's very nice being here.
Awesome. So, originally, I know you live now in Mesa, Arizona, and so originally, where are you from? Where does family? Where does your origin? Where does your roots start?
My roots start in southern Illinois, a small town called Centralia, about 14,000 people.
Awesome.
It was pretty close to Missouri, Mississippi, places like that. So there was a lot of segregation in my town.
Okay, I can imagine. Okay, so growing up, you were one of how many children?
Well, I was the fourth of five.
Fourth of five?
Yes.
Okay.
And fortunately, my mom and my pop, they lived for a long time.
Okay.
So we had pretty much a normal family during the struggling times when my dad was a carpenter and my mom started out as a teacher.
Okay.
However, as a teacher, once you got married at that time, you had to quit teaching.
Really?
So she stopped teaching after she got married, and after a few years started working as a cook at the local Walgreens, which, like everything else, was segregated, but she worked there. My dad was a carpenter. He was not a union member.
Okay.
And being a carpenter is a very difficult time.
Okay.
Because what happens is that the summers are nice.
Mm-hmm.
Things slow down in the winter.
Mm-hmm.
So, you're always struggling to have finances.
Right. Right. Awesome. Okay. So, early years, we live in Southern Illinois. We are in a segregated place. What was that like growing up in segregation during this time where we really were segregated as a people, especially Black folks, not being around white folks? What was the impact of that on your life growing up?
Well, the thing about it is that in a segregated situation, the first thing our parents taught us is you have to be twice as good to get half as far.
Mm-hmm.
And that really sticks with you.
Okay.
And you understand segregation because you know how you fit in the society. And understanding the years previous that if you stepped outside of the line, you could be arrested, lynched, or even killed.
Wow.
Now, we didn't have it like that.
Sure.
But it was a segregated society.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Okay. I can't imagine. I think I'm being 37, so, I came much later. So still dealing with our own forms of racism and discrimination. I just often think back to what it would have been like for me, myself, what I know now to live in a time of segregation. A part of me, at least some of my friends, we talk about, we probably would have been probably lynched or killed because though we probably would have tried to fit in, our mouths probably would have got us in a lot of trouble.
Well, that's interesting because a lot of people say, well, You know, if I were in a segregated
Sure.
situation, I would fight it.
Yeah.
Well, it depends upon which segregated situation you're in. Now, taking the slaves coming over on boats,
Sure.
and they weren't slaves when they came over,
Right.
but they were immediately became slaves. And so when they said, okay, you're going to be a slave, and if you found someone saying, no, I'm not going to be a slave, what they would do is probably shoot you
Right.
and say, who's next?
Right.
So, you know, we look kind of disparagingly
Yeah.
against some of our forefathers,
Okay.
and we don't understand what the situation
That's
was at that time.
That's true. That's so true. Look, words of wisdom, everyone. Words of wisdom. That's so true. So I'm reading your book. Now, ladies and gentlemen, Bill has written a book. I love because I heard Bill give this talk at Friendship Village, which is one of our senior living centers here in Arizona. And he talked about really not wanting to write a book. And I think that is fascinating. And yet we have this amazing book. This book is great. And so it is entitled Clear for Takeoff, a pilot story of challenges and triumphs. And so I got to really read this book, dive into it. I want to do some more deep diving into the book because it's funny when I'm reading the book, because I've come to know Bill, I'm trying to see through your eyes as I'm reading the book. So it has been very fascinating. So I say thank you for writing this book. Yeah.
Well, I'd make one correction.
Okay.
My wife came up with the idea, and I started writing a book, and it sounded like Jack and Jill or something. So she actually wrote the book.
Okay. Okay.
And I had a good friend, Mike Lawrence, still a good friend, who was chief of staff for the governor of Illinois.
Okay.
So he edited it, Molly edited it, and we were just putting it together for our children initially,
Okay.
because your children know nothing about what your life is about.
Yep.
And our children, whether it's next door or whether it's children we have as friends, they are impressed with you.
Okay.
Your children are
Yeah.
not. I mean, you're just plain old mom and dad.
Right.
So
Right.
it helps to let them know what your journey has been like.
That's good. That's good. So I remember Molly telling me, Michael, I need to know your story.
Yeah.
And you need to write a book. And I was like, it's been on my heart to write a book. And so we'll see what that looks like going forward. I'm definitely going to reach out for Molly for the help because I feel like she is in the know when it comes to writing books.
Oh no, she's helped so many people write books, and she's
Awesome.
written books herself.
Okay.
She wrote a lot of books for teachers
Okay.
who are teaching special needs children and
Yeah.
different things. So,
Awesome.
so she's written a lot of books.
Okay. Okay. So let's dive into the early years. So I'm reading in the book, and you talk about living in a home with no running water. You have an outhouse. Now, I love it in here when you talk about we have the best constructed outhouse ever. What was that like?
Well, one correction: we did have running water.
Okay.
Okay. We didn't have heated running water.
Gotcha.
We heated the water on the stove.
Yep.
And some of the pipes were not 32 inches below the ground. They were about 12 inches, and every now and then they would freeze up. So we'd have to get a piece of paper and go out and heat the pipe so the water would run.
Gotcha.
And since we didn't have running water, or running hot water,
Hot water. Yeah.
we all took our baths on Saturday night.
Okay.
And a number 2 tub, and it got pretty greasy.
Yeah.
I was number 4, but number 5 it was really greasy. And I talked about our outhouse
Yeah.
because most outhouses were made of just regular board. And also the space for excrement was not
Yeah.
that deep.
Yep.
Ours was kind of a corrugated wooden with concrete floor.
Okay.
Just had one hole to it, but the pit was deep,
Okay.
and we could get that cleaned out periodically. So it wasn't bad.
Okay.
The one thing you learned about going to an outhouse is that there are 2 seasons when you can use it: spring and fall. In the summer, the horse flies would take you off.
Oh my gosh.
And in the winter, it was just so cold.
Yeah.
And even your toilet tissue, which was the Sears and Roebuck catalog, I mean, it was kind of rough. So
Yeah.
it wasn't a pleasant thing. And,
Sure.
and my wife grew up with indoor plumbing, and she spends more time in the bathroom than I do, because she said, why? I said, well, you got to get on there and get out.
Yes.
Yeah, you
Yes.
can't be lingering. You can't read newspapers or something like that. So,
Yeah.
but like I say, what doesn't kill you will make you stronger.
Absolutely. This young entertainment, from putting the propellers in your wheels to give it that brrr sound. I said, oh, look at these little inventors in here. And then to play this basketball game, if you will, with your socks. Can you explain that? What that game was you and your brother would play?
Well, that's a game we played quite often.
Okay.
In the winter.
Okay.
And what happens is when you open a door, normally in a house, it has a triangle. You couldn't dribble a sock.
Right.
Now, you understand, everyone understands that. But you dribble it verbally, just by
Okay.
saying.
Yep,
And when you
yep.
took time to take breath, you're through dribbling. So then you have to shoot. And shooting is pretty easy because the sock is soft.
Right.
And all you have to do is throw it above the door,
Okay.
and it'll fall in for a bucket.
Gotcha.
The only problem is that when you have a house that has a little dust on the wall, your parents don't like it because you're making spots on the wall. So, we kind of created our own fun.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, like most kids, I think we live in a age now. So I have a 11-year-old, and she's always hollering about being bored. Oh, I'm bored. Oh, I'm bored. And I'm like, have you read a book? Have you have you colored today? Have
That's
you drawn today? Trying to find something other than her tablet or, those things, because we've now moved into this age where kids live on their tablets, and tablets is their extension, if you will. So I think it was refreshing to read, hey, they created some fun. Because when you don't have a lot of money to go around, you got to create what you can.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
We made our own guns. We made it with sticks of wood
Okay.
out of an orange crate.
Wow.
And, if you wanted to have a repeater, you just put little notches on it and put 4 or 5 rubber bands and on a string, and then you just pull the string how many shots you want to make.
Right.
So you get very creative. Also, we would take our skates when they were kind of worn
Okay.
and take them apart and make us a scooter.
Wow.
Yeah, get a 2x4 and put the front part on the front part of the board that you're skating on, and the other half on the back, and you go skating. You could skate a lot, man. But nothing went to waste.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yes.
So,
Yes. That's awesome. That's awesome. We talk about, especially in the Black community. So if you don't know, in the Black community, barbershops are a central piece of the culture, if you ask me. Like, that is, outside of church, it is the barbershop. And so what was, especially because I love the section in your book where you talked about going to the barbershop and it being, having a barber who couldn't talk and cut at the same time. And so you're spending hours in the barber is for us. What was that like, going to the barbershop?
Well, the barbershop was across the street from our house.
Okay.
So that was a central visiting spot.
Okay.
And we had a lot of athletics. And that's when they would go and see the basketball game or football game on Friday or Saturday and come back and replay every play.
Okay.
So we got in there and visited, and like I said, the barber, when he's talking athletics, he would just stop. And remember, that time you had those old clippers
Yes.
where you did it by hand,
Oh, my
and every now and then it would pull hair out instead of cutting it. But You know, it was a real place where we got social education,
Yep.
where we got a little bit of philosophy from the older people, and also, as in most barbershops, there's one person that owns an atlas,
Yes.
and what happens is that they are the bearer of truth, because if you get on a subject, this one guy would run home, get his atlas, read what was right, and come back and correct us all. So it was an education, a real education.
Yeah.
And we learned a lot.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember my barbershop days. Still go to a barbershop, but it's a lot different now.
Yes,
It's a lot different now. But I do remember the barbershop and just being mesmerized by, at that time you growing up, you're like, oh, I want to be a barber too. Like,
Yeah,
so I want to be able to talk to these people and get to know people.
And then too, the jobs are pretty scarce.
Okay.
Okay. And professional jobs, the barbershop was a professional job.
Yeah.
The other professional jobs were teaching,
Okay.
being a doctor, which was rare, or a dentist, which was more rare.
Okay.
Okay. And one of the smartest people in our hometown became a janitor.
Oh, wow.
Yes. So he had constant work and he made good money.
Okay.
So
Okay.
you learn a lot from the variety
Yeah.
and where you can't guess what is a person's attitude toward things or how accomplished they become.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow. Smartest person in town, a janitor. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Growing up in the black church, I know all too well.
I wouldn't say I thought he was the most in tune
Sure.
with what it means to make money. We have smarter people in town.
Of course.
Okay. I just wanted to make that clear that our
Yeah.
teachers, our preachers, our doctors,
Yeah.
so
From those, again, because you still learn a lot from his work ethic, his wisdom, his, yeah.
and the one thing you learn from him is that you can't spend what you don't have.
Yeah.
I mean,
So very
well,
true.
Quite often I speak to people who are retired, and sometimes they say they run out of money before they run out of month.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
they're behind the curve. so,
Right.
yeah.
Right. Right. Growing up in the black church, I grew up in the black church. Me and my friends who've all grown up in the black church, a lot of us work in predominantly white spaces in churches. So we do have this dialogue often about the black church and how we missed the black church. We just don't miss the bad parts of the black church. And that's another topic for another show. But black church did get you ready for public speaking. And I liked how you talked about getting Easter speeches and getting Christmas speeches and getting up there in front of the people and saying these memorized monologues and excerpts and scriptures. What was that like for you growing up?
Well, it gave you an opportunity to be basically an entertainer.
Yeah.
And we started having speeches when you were 4 years old.
Yep.
And you get comfortable with speaking to crowds. And you're really proud that you were able to be selected
Yeah.
to speak to the audience in the church. And so when you started public speaking, it wasn't that big a deal.
Right.
I mean, because you'd been before adults all your life talking, and it just kind of flowed naturally.
Yeah. Yeah. Good training ground for sure.
Excellent training, John.
Excellent training ground.
And understanding the black church, number one, my dad didn't go to church,
Okay.
but my mom went to church.
Oh, yeah.
And you went to church every Sunday. Every Sunday. And you could stay out, even when I was 18, 19 in college, you could stay out as late as you want to, but on 11 o'clock,
You still
you're
going
going to
to
go to church.
That's right.
So,
That's right.
that's just part of living.
Yeah.
And I was in a Baptist church,
Okay.
and the only thing about a Baptist church, it's kind of long.
Yes.
I mean,
Tell me about it.
nothing to have a 2.5 hour,
Tell me about it.
3 hour sermon.
Yep.
I mean, not the whole sermon, but the sermon is an hour.
An hour, right?
Yeah, an
45
hour
minutes
sermon.
to an
Yeah.
hour at least. Yes.
And one of the things that got me to reading the Bible is that sometimes you would be in church and the preacher would be talking about Genesis, and then he would go to Paul, then he would go to Babylon, and I just wanted to know, what does the Bible say?
Right.
And be able to really not critique,
Sure.
but analyze.
Sure.
Where are you going or where are you trying to go?
Right.
So,
Right. Look, Bill got a quick lesson in seminary, because when you go to seminary, that's what seminary prepares you to do too. So you're always, I was just telling a friend this, when I listen to pastors and preachers, it's hard for me to go in and not analyze, critique. Where are you coming from? Did you do your research? Because now I've learned, or I've been taught to really not just hear what this says, but to actually dive in and say, okay, who is this audience? Who is being spoken to? Who is talking? Those things matter. So you're right. Yeah.
well, they do matter, and I've always been kind of efficient with my time.
Okay.
So I went to the church in my hometown,
Okay.
basically a black Baptist church. We weren't Southern Baptists, we were missionary Baptists, which is a difference. And then I got into, and we had the same thing when I was at the university.
Okay.
But I got into the Air Force, and I found out you can have a service in an hour.
Yes.
And I said, I kind of like this much better. I mean, give me an hour of
Right,
church
right.
rather than 3 hours.
They're 3.
So when I found out you could do that, now the Air Force wasn't that it's spiritual,
Okay.
because
Sure.
when in the Air Force, when they would talk about, one of the real, church hymns,
Yeah.
I would always be behind them
Okay.
because they say, lead me to the cross, lead me to the, and I'd be going, amazing grace and things like that, and which embarrassed Molly sometimes, but it's just, and I found out once we got out of the Air Force and started our career, I found that we kind of enjoyed the Methodist Church.
Okay.
Now, my wife, grew up with AME,
Okay.
African
Okay.
Methodist
Yes.
Episcopal,
Yes.
which was similar to the Baptist Church, just slightly different rules.
Yep.
But I found out I was a lot more convenient or a lot more interested in an hour service
Sure.
than a 3 hour service.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I just enjoyed it, but it did drive me to read the Bible.
Yeah.
And of course, I started with King James.
Mm-hmm.
And when I got to about the 23rd chapter, begetting and begotten and this kind of stuff, I said, So a friend of ours told me about the NIV Bible.
NIV,
And
yep.
I started doing that. And I also have a Bible a friend gave me. She was head of the nursing program in Chicago.
Okay.
And also very spiritual. And she sent me this Bible that's NIV plus Peterson,
Okay.
side by side.
Yeah.
So I enjoy that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Mm-hmm. So you talked about the Air Force. We get to high school. You get to high school. You're now the first African American quarterback
Yes.
to play. What was that experience like, being
Well-
the first?
Well, you don't think about it being the first, because you're just playing football.
Sure.
And we played the single wing, and we had a tremendous
Okay.
time. In my 4 years, we only lost 2 games.
Okay.
And both of those were to East St. Louis because they were tough. you know.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
But anyway, in the single wing, I played flanker, basically, but I was a quarterback. And I think the coach made me the quarterback because I could remember all the plays.
Right.
Because we'd break the huddle sometimes. Some guy said, what am I going to do on this? And, I'd tell them. So I enjoyed that.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's awesome. So,
And the other thing that's different in the black community, more so than the Caucasian community, your parents didn't go to a lot of practices.
okay.
They'd go to a game every now and then, but not to practice.
Sure.
Where we'd have the lawyers and the doctors on the sideline and, cheering their kids on and also making sure they got the start.
Right.
This kind of stuff. So
Right.
we understood what it was all about.
Yeah.
Like in my high school, we had a youngster named Bobby Joe Mason,
Okay.
who was the best athlete I've ever played with, ever. And he was an all-star. And since we had an unwritten rule that you could only have 3 blacks on the basketball court at one time,
Wow.
now it wasn't written anywhere, but it was unwritten rule. And he was an all-star and never got to the state tournament in 4 years. And we got another coach who played 4 and 5 blacks. They went to state the first year and got second in the
Right.
state. But I mean, you understand
Sure.
these unwritten rules.
Absolutely.
Certain people don't get to play and others do not.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So we're in high school. Please tell us about this year off from school.
Well, again, this year off of school was a thing that we knew better, and
Okay.
a few of us decided we would, go out and date people, whoever
Yep.
we wanted to,
Yep.
which was a no-no.
Okay.
So we, us, 4 or 5 of us were dating
Sure.
these white girls.
Sure.
And a couple of them were all-star athletes.
Okay.
And I was just a nobody, and this buddy of mine was nobody, so they kind of picked us out to make an example of us. And my folks didn't have money to get a lawyer.
Sure.
The whole high school was all white, even the janitor. And they suggested we stay out a year, the 4 of us, and which I did. And I knew I couldn't stay home without working.
Right.
So I got a job and worked, and I had the support of my mentor, who was a Tuskegee Airman, had the support of my church, had the support of my family, and of the 4 of us, I was the only one who went back to school. And when I went back to school, since I was a good student, my first 2 years, it was total acceptance.
Okay.
And nobody, that was one of the things I thought about. What will be the acceptance?
Sure.
But having been a good student, there was not,
Sure.
they just understood, no big deal.
Right. Right.
So,
And how old were you at that time?
I was 16,
16.
17. And,
Okay. Okay.
and, I often think about it now. I don't want to talk in relationship to me
Absolutely.
with Job, but I kind of see that as one of the best things that happened to me,
Okay.
because I wasn't as good an athlete at that time. And what they did was to harm me. And it actually made me better because it made me more determined. I got bigger as an athlete and more talented.
Awesome.
So it wound up being something that worked out well,
Yep.
although it was meant as punishment.
Sure. A blessing in disguise.
That's right.
A blessing in disguise. So we talk about a blessing in disguise. We talk about trusting this process of I'm out of school. Here I am. I'm back. I have the support of my family. Now we get to graduation. You're going off to college. You get to college, and where did you attend school? College.
University, Southern Illinois University.
Southern Illinois.
Which is in Carbondale, Illinois.
Okay. You become their quarterback. I love this quote from your sister, and it's a prophetic quote because when I read it, I wrote in here, wow, such a divine moment. And she said, you say, my sister Dolores was sitting in the stands, overheard a person say, they have a nigger playing quarterback. Pretty soon they'll be flying airplanes.
Yep.
What was that quote? Like, what did that do for you in that moment? You're probably angry or whatever, but what was that moment like to hear that being said?
Well, it was just, understanding racism.
Sure.
And they're trying to degrade you as a person and dismiss you as a person. And thinking about the most a ridiculous thing that could ever happen.
Right.
You'd been a quarterback, which was bad.
Right.
And it'd be ridiculous if you thought you could fly an airplane.
Right.
So it was prophetic. And,
Yeah.
and I laugh at it,
Yeah.
because you can't let someone else describe what you're going to become.
That's right.
So
That's right.
sometimes those are motivators.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. So then you go, what got you into, I think the question what got you into or wanting to get into the Air Force ROTC? Like what led you down that? Was it your mentor because he was a Tuskegee Airman? What led you down that path to want to attend Air Force ROTC or become a part?
Okay, well, my mentor, who came when I was in the seventh grade in elementary school, was a Tuskegee Airman.
Okay.
At the time, they didn't have any children. And he was such an outstanding person and so impressive. And he took me under his wing. I wanted to be a doctor. I had the academic qualifications, but scholarships were kind of few and far between, and we didn't have the money.
Okay.
So I started getting more interested in the idea of aviation just by meeting him. And that's who turned my life into thinking about flying.
Okay.
Now, when I went to university, there was 2 years of mandatory ROTC.
Okay. Wow.
And I went through that. And then I decided that looking realistically at a career, there weren't many careers for African Americans
Okay.
that paid well.
Sure.
And I was taking chemistry and math and doing well. And that's when I said, well, why don't I look at advanced ROTC? The other thing about ROTC, the first year is you got this mule blanket you wear around that's heavy and ugly and everything else. I mean, it looked like it was made out of a mule blanket.
Gotcha.
And when we went to advanced ROTC, you got a tailor-made gabardine uniform.
Okay.
And I wore my uniform all day, whether it was because I didn't have all the clothes to wear.
Gotcha.
And also, when you went into advanced ROTC, if you were planning to become a pilot, the government paid for 36 hours of flight time.
Wow.
And, I was interested in flying, so I decided I'd take that up too. you know. And it was right after the football season that I started flying.
Awesome.
And, and the one thing that I always did, and I encourage youngsters to do, is whenever you have a class, go home and try to learn something from that class while it's still fresh.
Yep.
Because it's so much easier. And I had a very successful time in my training at the university.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Can you explain to us your first flight, what that felt like? What ran through your body? What ran through your mind? What was that like when your first flight?
Well, it's kind of like your first time you go in a swimming pool.
Okay.
You don't know what's going to happen, and is this thing going to stay together? Am I going to fall out? And the first thing you do is lean away from the door. If they bank to the right, you lean to the left, because you're not so sure this thing's going to work right. So it's and once you relax, it's enjoyable.
Sure.
But it's a new feeling,
Okay.
because you wonder, why is this thing holding together?
Yeah.
I mean, why does it fly and things
Yeah.
like that? So once you get that initial impression, then it's
Smooth
relaxing.
sailing.
Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. I just remember for many who don't know, my first degree, my first associate's degree is in funeral service. So I was in the funeral business for a long time. And so I remember the feeling of my first time in a prep room around bodies. And I was like, oh my gosh, like this is what I've been preparing for so long. It was so life-giving in that moment. And I was like, oh, I'm where I'm supposed to be. Like it was literally that this is where I'm supposed to be moment.
Yes. And once and they take you up on a, initial flight.
Okay.
And once I got there and felt. I said, hey, this is something I could do, and I could do well.
Right.
Yeah. So.
Right. Awesome. So then you get into the military. You go off to these segregated still Air Force bases. Some of them I read still being the only black pilot or very few black pilots in these programs. I loved how you talked about not, and I'm paraphrasing everyone, not allowing other people's thoughts of other people to be how you view that person. And so you talked about was a lieutenant who was a very hard, stern. Everyone was like, he's not gonna. He's very tough. He's hard.
Well, I was fortunate because when I was training at Southern Illinois University, I had an instructor, and I had an African-American friend who was a year ahead of me in that program. And he told me, man, you really don't want this instructor because he's prejudiced. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, I'll determine whether a person is prejudiced or not.
Absolutely.
And he wasn't prejudiced. He was just mean.
Right.
He just wanted you to fly an airplane a certain safe way.
Okay.
And so anyway, his name was Glenn Sheets. And Glenn, at that time, we had 36 hours of flight training, but most of the solo time was 12 to 14 hours.
Okay.
And so I always had a habit of going home and reviewing what I went to, and I would write it down, what I did well and what I did poorly. And so every day I would read that before I went up flying. And so one day Glenn said, Bill, I don't know why you don't make the same mistakes all these other guys do all the time. And I said, well, you're such a great instructor. I don't know why they don't. So I wound up soloing in 5.5 hours.
Wow.
Which is still a record down there.
Wow.
Yeah. So, but it was because I worked hard. And he was a great instructor.
Sure.
When I got to Air Force, the first place I went was Moore Air Base down in Texas, Mission McAllen area.
Okay.
And this program had been going on since 1948. I got down there in 1959. They had civilian instructors and military supervision.
Okay.
They had never graduated an African-American out of this program.
Wow.
When I got there.
Wow.
And a guy who was in another squadron who was African-American graduated from that program 6 weeks before I graduated.
Okay.
So I wasn't the first to graduate out of that program. And then for the second half of my pilot training, I went in 1960 to Selma, Alabama at Craig Air Force Base. And everyone knows what that was like then.
Yes.
So, and at that base, I was only African-American in that training. And my first training, primary training, I had the same type instructor that I had at SIU. So he was a bachelor and grouchy and everything, but he wanted you to learn to fly well.
Absolutely.
And then I got to flying the first jet I flew in Selma, Alabama. And my instructor was from New York, everything like that. He was probably the worst instructor I had. Okay. You know, because you just can't go by location. But if he could have flunked me out, he would have.
He would have. Wow.
But what happened, our flight commander was an exchange student from England. And he was totally British, about 6'2", 170 pounds, you know, and just a nice guy. So I flew with him a lot. Okay. And I flew with one of the commanders of Air Training Command. Okay. So he couldn't do a thing to me. Right. But if he could have, he would have flunked me. Wow. You know. So, but anyway, hey, that's part of it.
That's part of it.
That's part of it. Yeah. You know what the situation is when you move into it. So it's not. Yeah. But no, it was fine.
It was good.
Yeah.
I love that. Mm-hmm. So we get to the Air Force. We go through this training. What was it in you that said, "Hey, I have to find a place to land, to work, for my family"? What led you to apply for the airlines?
Well, at that time, there were no African Americans flying passengers.
Gotcha.
In the U.S. We had Augusta Martin that was flying cargo. Okay. And at that time, I was in Strategic Air Command flying B-52s, and looking to the future, it might not be the greatest career path.
Sure.
So I decided that, hey, let's take a chance on that.
Yeah.
And it was interesting because normally they have a group of people, which were all white males, in a class, and then they would take them through the testing. And once they decided they might want to take a look at me, instead of being with 40 or 50, I wound up going to Stanford University
Okay.
to take the toughest test, which is the Stay-9 test. And you're not supposed to know how you did on that test. But the professor that gave me the test by myself,
Wow.
he said, you aced the test.
Wow.
I'm not supposed to tell you, but you
Sure,
aced the
sure.
test. So I went on. And then the other interesting thing is that they wanted to take a good look at not only me, but my wife.
Okay.
So they invited us out with managers and vice presidents, different people, for 5 different dinners in San Francisco, which is about an hour from Travis Air Force Base. And so, you know the game they're playing.
Yep.
They want to see how you fit or if you will fit.
Right.
And so we took them to 5 of the most expensive restaurants in San Francisco.
Absolutely.
And the last time, Molly, my wife, this vice president said, you can't afford to tie your shoes the wrong way because people are going to be looking to criticize you. Mm-hmm. And it really upset her. And I said, Molly, this is not my first rodeo. Anytime you play quarterback at a white university when they haven't had them, and nobody had them in the country at white university at that time. I mean, this is a walk in the park.
Yep.
Yeah. So.
Yep. Wow. So you go through that strenuous 5 interviews, really microscoping your family, picking it apart. Do you fit? And then what was it like to finally get the call or the okay, we're hiring you at United?
It was great.
Okay.
Yeah, and I got out of the Air Force May 24th and started class with United at May 31st
Okay.
of 1965. And at that time, some of the airlines, I know United and TWA, were hiring white youngsters
Okay.
who had 185 hours in a Cessna 172, and they were hiring them. I had something like 1,700 hours.
Right.
And a lot of them looked at me like I was an affirmative action hire.
Okay.
And you only take it so long.
Sure.
So one day, the primary airplane for training was a DC-6.
Okay.
Now, DC-6 used to have those things with propellers on them, okay? So one day we were walking around this DC-6, and I was a little irritated with them, look the way they were looking
Sure.
askance at me. And so I said, let me tell you something. This airplane here that you're so impressed with it being big, it'll fit under one wing of the B-52 I flew in the Air Force. So let's understand, you had one engine. This has 4 engines. I had 8 engines. So let's get off.
Right,
that. So,
right.
Anyway.
Awesome. What was it like? Take us through your first flight with United, your career as a whole. What was that like, again, coming as the first African-American pilot? Now you're ready for your first flight. What was that moment like for you?
Well, the first flight, it was a very pleasant flight. We
Okay.
flew from Chicago to Cleveland, Ohio.
Okay. So Chicago was your base.
Yeah, Chicago
Okay.
was my base.
Gotcha.
And so we got to Cleveland, and there were about 6 sky caps who had gotten off 2 hours earlier that met me there,
Wow.
which was impressive.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, some of the people who were in management who happened to be African American didn't see the necessity to make something special.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Come on, being the local celebrity, you didn't even know.
Yeah, and because they thought they were the celebrity.
Sure.
And which is fine.
Yeah.
which
Yep.
is fine.
Yep.
In fact, at one time, they had BPO, Black Professional Organization, at the airline with the people who were in management, on their way up and this kind of stuff. And they wouldn't allow pilots in because they said we weren't professionals, and we were making more money than all of them. Oh yeah,
Wow.
but this is people competing for attention.
Yep.
So, but
Yep.
anyway,
Okay. Awesome. So we had a good career.
yes,
We had an amazing career. We flying. What was it? Take us through. Just we're now coming to the end. It's time for retirement. What does that look like for you? What was that like knowing, hey, I've flown. I was the first to do it. Now it's time to hang up my wings in this place for a moment. What was that like?
Oh, it was great. We started in 1976. We started an organization called the Black Organization of Black Airline Pilots.
Okay.
And we started that because some airlines treated African American pilots different than other airlines. So
Okay.
we were a support group. We also wanted to be mentors
Okay.
for our youngsters.
Okay.
So we got that started, and it's still in operation today.
Okay,
It's
awesome.
a different acronym, stands for the Organization of Black Professional
Gotcha.
Aviation.
Gotcha.
So, but
Okay.
anyway, and they're doing a good job today.
Awesome.
But the start was back in 1976.
Wow.
So anyway, it was a good career.
Awesome.
Good career.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And so then we land here.
Yeah.
We snowbirds for a little bit. I read in the book you're snowbirds for a little bit, going back and forth from Mesa back to Illinois. What was it that said, hey, we're going to put our roots down here in Arizona? What was that process like into where we are today?
Well, a couple of things. We tend to always plan ahead.
Okay.
And, we were looking at some places where we might want to retire.
Okay.
I flew to Miami a lot,
Okay.
and I don't like bugs, which they have down there. I'm not a ocean person. It's so humid.
Yep.
It's flat.
Yep.
And the other thing is that I would go out walking. I always walked a lot when I was on a layover. Like when I was in Hawaii, I'd walk around Diamond Head a couple of times
Okay.
in the morning. And I'd walk past some of these senior men sitting on a bench, look like flies are going to hang on them and they're looking at each other to say, who's going to die first? So there was no activity. And when we came out here the first time, they had a radio control air, model club
Right.
that I liked. So we decided that we'd buy a place over at VDO and come back. Because at that time we were pulling fifth wheel. We had
Wow.
that for a couple of years.
Wow.
And we did a lot of boating and
Yeah.
things, water skiing and all this
Yep.
kind of stuff. So.
Yep. And listen, guys, what I've learned about Bill and Molly so far, they are some traveling people, okay? Like, they are always gone. That is my hope and desire one day, to get to the point to where I can travel in the same ways you all get to travel and see the world, because I have yet to go out the country. So I still have to do that. Excuse me. So, yeah, thank you. And just last question, what would you, or advice, encouragement, would you give to the next generation going forward, becoming who God has called them to become? What advice or encouragement would you give this next generation?
Well, when you find a talent that you're fortunate enough to have, use that talent for the good of the community,
Awesome.
for your location, and for the world. We all have a talent.
Yes.
So all our talents are different.
Yeah.
But when you find that talent, make sure that you use it for the good and not only for the money.
Right.
Money is nice,
Yeah.
but that's all it is.
That's it.
It provides an opportunity to do things that you're not able to do, but don't let money drive you.
Right.
Have some focus as to how can I contribute to the next generation to make things better
Yeah.
and improve them.
Awesome. Awesome. Bill, thank you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for being with us. Everyone, Bill Norwood, everyone, we're so grateful. So thank you. Yeah, thank you for coming to the Becoming Project, listening to this episode. And we'll see you on the other side. Peace.
Well, thanks for the invitation.